everybody. Today I have a really special guest with me, Umar Saif. He has been someone who's a trailblazer in Pakistan. Honestly, sir, you've done so much, whether it's related to, establishing Pakistan's first IT university. You've also received Sitara-i-Imtiaz, which is a really big honor in Pakistan. You've started Plan 9, which is a really big Punjab's incubation center as well. You're on to your 7th startup now, is what you've mentioned on LinkedIn, which I really want to get more into, because having such an amazing background of working with different startups, starting your own, helping other people. You're also CEO of Khudi Ventures, which is Pakistan's largest venture builder, and you're also investing in different startups. So I really want to get more into, the idea of where did it start for you? क्या ये स्टार्टअप बनाने का कीड़ा was always there as a kid, या फिर ये बस खुद ही बनता गया in your journey?
Oh, very good. One, thank you for inviting me. I see all the great work that you're doing, mashallah. And it's always great to see a young Pakistani woman going out and charting her own course and, mashallah, succeeding in the way that you have. So
thank you so much.
Congratulations, and I wish you all the best in your future journey. For me, life is a kind of a set of sliding doors for all of us, and we can't plan everything.
Absolutely.
Even though if you look at my career, it might look fairly orchestrated to you, but it wasn't as orchestrated. So I went to a good school here called aiSight. I went to a good university in Pakistan called Umars. At the time, it used to be a 2-room university, literally in the middle of the year.
Okay.
I was in the second undergraduate batch of Umars, and at the time, they only had 2 majors, economics or computer science. When I graduated from aiSight, kind of the normal thing for everyone to do was to go abroad and study. And I was kind of young at the time. I was only 16. Typically, you graduate from high school at 18.
True.
I'd skipped a grade and this and that. My dad was in the army. They were moving around. So I'd saved a couple of years. And then kind of my mom was not too keen. I'm kind of the only son. I have a sister. She wasn't too keen to part with her son at 16. So she wanted to hold on to me for a little longer. She would get very emotional just at the thought of sending me away. So which is also very kind of, desi thing to do.
Yeah.
So I stayed back in Pakistan and, and went to Umars, which was a bit of a coin toss. No one knew about Umars and it wasn't much of a university at the time. And I actually went into Umars as an economics major because of the two, computer science never done. So economics I'd also not done, but my dad said, let's explore economics. And Umars had a 3-year undergrad program at the time, not a 4-year program. They squished it.
You were one of the lucky ones.
So no, it was very unlucky in the sense that they had no summer break. There were no quarter-based system. You had to take 5 to 7 courses every semester. So we had to do the same workload that you would do in an American university in 4 years, but you only had 3 years to do it. So then it was very rigorous. I remember sleeping on my keyboard in the lab for many days and many nights in these very grueling 3 years. But in the first year, I was an economics major. I found it too easy, and I don't typically, this is meant as an insult to anyone, but I'd never done economics before. In the first year, I was an econ major, and it just didn't excite me or didn't challenge me. So second year, I became a computer science major, and then essentially there was a 2-year training in computer science, with a 3-year degree, and that's what I did. And then after that, I applied for grad school and went to Cambridge for a PhD. Now Cambridge just so happened, just so that it's an arcane system. They have residential colleges and this and that, but you could potentially do your PhD in 3 years. I wouldn't recommend it. There's no rush in doing these things, but I ended up doing it in 3 years, and there's kind of no taught programs. After like 3 years of undergrad at Umars and then a 3-year PhD, I was done with grad school, and I was only 20. Now, this is typically the age when people graduate from college. And I had already done a PhD. So that's when, the dog, which had started running after a car, had caught up with them and then didn't go to the car. And that's what happened. But so that's been my journey. And in this journey, because I then from Cambridge, I moved to the US and worked at MIT for many years. Now, in places like Cambridge and MIT, a lot of people do startups. So I was part of several startups, some more successful than others. And then I I moved back to Pakistan in 2005, end of 2005, 2006, after spending about 4 years at MIT, and started working at LUMS. This was my undergraduate alma mater. I was the first kid to do a PhD, LUMS ka, and I was the first kid to come back and become a professor at LUMS. I was tenured at LUMS at the stage. I did research there. From my lab at LUMS came out a couple of startups with students. And this was a time when Pakistan, much like today, had a big energy crisis. So you would get electricity 1 hour, electricity the next hour. It was very challenging to work on these startups, very difficult times. A lot of us got very disillusioned, me, my students, people that I work with. These startups were not going anywhere. And then at some stage, but in the process, we made Pakistan's largest SMS messaging platform. Wow. It was like, think of this as Twitter over SMS. It was called Chopar, and then SMS one, and many other things. PTI was almost the largest political party in Pakistan, was bootstrapped on this platform where people would become a member of it by sending a message. And but others have used this platform also. And then we also developed Pakistan's largest citizen journalism platform. CNN iReport had just come around, and I got very inspired by that people, common man on the street could contribute news, if they came across news, would take a picture of it and contribute news. So it was citizen contributed content. So we made CN Report, and it was adopted by 3 TV channels in Pakistan and mainstreamed and became a real big platform. So those things that happened, then I took up a government job, and as soon as I took a government job, I wanted to establish an incubator that would make it easier for people to do startups in Pakistan, which is what Plan9 became. It was actually the first big startup incubator in Pakistan. And whatever seed we sowed at the time eventually blossomed into this whole startup ecosystem. This was in 2013 that I established this. So it took us many years, but just last year, there were $350 million that were invested in Pakistani startups.
Amazing.
So this is because Plan9 got created, and then based on that template, 15, 16 other incubators got created. Then there were 300, 400 odd startups in Pakistan. Then venture funds got established in Pakistan. So this has been kind of good to see, and to see how we could trailblaze in government. And then the private sector picked up the ball, did it at a bigger scale, and now we kind of at least have a semblance of an ecosystem in Pakistan. So that's kind of the journey there. In the process, I established a university, which is something I've always wanted to do in Pakistan. I'm not fully done with that agenda yet because the university didn't. But this is something I intend to go back to at some stage and establish a good university in Pakistan. Currently, I'm very focused on trying to build kind of massive startups, and I think there's a big opportunity locally in emerging markets, other places, and not enough people doing it with the intensity that this needs to be done. And therefore, I have 2 lives. I run a AI analytics startup called aiSight. It used to be called Survey Auto. And I run Khudi Ventures, which is a startup studio or a venture builder, where we are with our own money and own resources, own ideas, now building a bunch of startups. We just launched one, which is a matrimony platform called Sitara-i-Imtiaz. It has very quickly become a very large platform in Pakistan. And shortly, we're going to enter into a e-commerce or social commerce space. And then after that, short form entertainment content, think TikTok, but slightly different. And then a fintech. So that's my pipeline there.
Wow. But sir, I would really want to know, because you worked in the education sector, right? Mashallah, had amazing degrees from the top universities in the world. Then you came back and established one on your own in Pakistan as well. You've had a chance to work with the government, break those ties and bridge those gaps between the government and the SMEs and the startup sector. And you started Plan9 at a time when startup ecosystem in Pakistan was not really a thing in 2013. So how has your experience been in terms of learning, taking from one sector to the next, and then, building upon that?
I think there's a lot of opportunity to do great stuff in Pakistan. When I came back and joined LUMS, there was I remember there was no organized research lab at LUMS at the time. So as part of my contract, I negotiated a little space where I could establish a research lab. And a lot of people told me that from a place like LUMS, you can't really do world-class research because, it's a great teaching university, but it's not a place to do great research. It's a private university. But from there, the research that I did there finally got me the TR35, which is the top 35 innovators in the MIT Tech Review. And I kind of, a lot of people think that most of my research accomplishments must have been at Cambridge and MIT. Actually, they were when I was at LUMS.
Wow.
And droves of students came out of my lab. Many of them have now completed their PhDs. Some are about to become professors in US universities.
Amazing. Wow.
And I didn't find it difficult. There's all this great talent. LUMS had great students.
Yep.
The university was very supportive of doing research. You don't need a lot of resources to put together a research lab. And actually, it was fairly conducive. So I didn't find it too difficult. Similarly, when I was going into the government, a lot of people scared me that you want to do this or that, or this. But I didn't find any of that to be true. With the government scale resources and the government scale authority that you have for making things happen, wasn't I didn't find it too difficult. Whatever we set out to do, we were able to accomplish. We started a university from scratch. It blossomed into a 1,200 people university. 74 people from outside of Pakistan who done PhDs from some of the top places came back to Pakistan to become professors there. We started Plan 9 and see the impact that it has had. And most of my government automation work, from land records to property taxation to healthcare to education, this and that, all had very profound long-term impact because of the automation work we can do. One, there was a lot of opportunity to do it because all of this needs to be done, and then everyone wanted us to do it. So a lot of people might scare you saying that in countries like Pakistan, it's very difficult to get work done. I have not found that to be true, either as a professor working in a university or working in public sector, wanting to get things done. And then now subsequently also, I'm focused on a startup as well as on this venture builder that we are doing consumer startups which are domestically focused, right? So that's Khudi Ventures. And we've done this first one, and huge response, solves a big problem. It's a clear product market fit. We can scale this to the expat market very quickly. It's not just a valuable enterprise, but profitable. So you could be cash flow positive very quickly in companies like this. So I think there's just a lot to be done. And frankly, it's easy to do in countries like Pakistan because everything needs to be digitized. Look at just the financial sector. There are 100 million adults who've never seen a bank or deposited money in a bank. Such a huge problem solving must be very easy to do, right? If most of your adult population is unbanked, how difficult would it be to introduce them to financial instruments that could make their life better, right? So I believe all these things can be done actually fairly simply, as long as someone does it with the kind of intensity that you need to do startups or take on new projects and initiatives.
Wow. Amazing. But then I would really want to go back to the idea, because you said that, let's say if you're working on your 7th startup now, which could be Dil Ka Rishta or could be anything else, like aiSight as well that you're working on right now. Like if you were to compare Umar Saif starting off his very first startup in his life and to now, like how has that journey been like? Can you compare that journey for me?
Wow, that's a question I've not thought about before. So I'll have to make this up as we go along, and hence it may not be a very organized answer. So kind of the first startup was done with a lot more in optimism. I thought we could develop a great idea. I would not talk to anyone about that idea. I thought I could come up with this fantastic idea, and we'll develop this overnight. And next day when we launch, we will be the next Google. And so that was the optimism. And 1 and 2, little understanding of what it takes to build a business, right, or an enterprise. So it was all about these, in many ways, romantic stories of 2 kids dropping at Harvard and working on a cool idea in a garage that, would then scale to become Yahoo's and Google's and Microsoft's. Not, but it's of course more nuanced than that and much more involved in that, and it takes much longer to also succeed. So a typical journey for a startup is typically 5 to 7 years. I now fully understand why that is the case, and that you have to keep at it for much longer than most people anticipate. And initially, whatever you start out with, you have to pivot many times before you stumble upon an idea that you scale into a business. And that's universally true. I think that is true for anyone. So even if you look at a story from even someone like Mark Zuckerberg, and one would imagine, this 19-year-old or whatever, worked on an idea in a dorm room, and he had one of the largest companies in the world. That's actually not true. You look at the evolution of Facebook, and there were actually 3 kind of attempts that it made just on this idea before that. And one of them got him expelled out of Harvard for breaching privacy of students because stealing their pictures from their yearbook or something. So it actually done 3 pivots on the same idea before it began to scale. And the same is true for just about anything else, right? So look at Google, and there were actually many search engines at the time. And they stumbled and kind of, found their way into what may or may not work. And at the time, jury was out on 2 different ways to rank pages. One was how many inbound links a page gets, which is the authority of the certain keyword, which is what Google is. But there was another theory which was also equally compelling, which was how much traffic a page generates for a certain a keyword, right? And these 2 big algorithms just took off. It looked like a much more difficult algorithm to implement, by the way, theoretically, because you had to kind of download the entire internet, so to speak, a graph of all the pages that are in the internet. How crazy could that, right? They download the entire internet, see which page links to which other page, and build a whole graph out of that, and then begin to rank each node in that graph, according to certain search terms. You think about that idea, and it's like it's entirely impractical. Great mathematical theory on what is an authentic page and what is what is authority and how do you transfer it between pages for certain keywords. But how can you build a graph of all the pages, web pages in the world? But that's what it is, right? So and I remember an interview by one of the founders of Google. And he said, I woke up in the middle of the night sweating because I just dreamed of us trying to download the entire internet, because that's what the internet, the algorithm entailed. And he said, I was like, what are we going to do with that? Anyway, but that's what Google is, right? And the other algorithm seemed much simpler and much more compelling to implement, which is based on traffic, but never caught on. And but that's what it is. Look at Airbnb, simple idea. You could rent a room in your house, right? Now one would imagine 3 kids came up with this fantastic idea and succeeded. But that's not how it happened. Airbnb is called Airbnb because a lot of people in US, especially college students, have an air bed, like an inflatable little air mattress.
Right. Yes.
Closet, because a friend might come along and they may want to sleep on the floor, and you can inflate this mattress. By the way, if you've slept on one, it's incredibly comfortable. I've slept on many incredible visiting friends or hosting friends, and it's very uncomfortable. But that's what they had, and they wanted that incredible mattress, which is really put to good use, be something of value. That's how Airbnb started. Did not take off. Then they said, all right, how do we get the word out? Well, they looked at Craigslist. That's where people were posting short-term rentals, this and that. And they built a growth hack where they would steal data from Craigslist, send an email to whoever had just posted this request to try and find short-term housing anywhere, and say, hey, you can find it on our platform. So that growth hack went in and still failed. And then they said, all right, we can't do the B&B part of this. How about doing the breakfast part of this? And therefore, they started selling customized Cheerios. And they went to the Democratic National Convention, DNC, and printed boxes of, I think, Barack Obama's face on it and tried to build breakfast cereal. I kid you not, that was the second pivot. And then they came back and they kind of continued to work on this idea, and eventually Airbnb happened. It's obvious idea, you should rent a room, an unused guest room in your house for someone and make money off of it, sure. But then but this is many years of going through several painful pivots and then eventually finding your way into trying to do something useful. And that's one of the more kind of obvious, compelling ideas of scale. Imagine someone trying to build an enterprise, AI platform, which is what I'm trying to do with the aiSight. How the trials and tribulations of trying to build something of that scale and trying to find a market fit, and the engineering effort or the engineering black hole that you go into for years before you come out. My favorite, view of a startup is this little interview that I heard of a guy in my field. So there's a company called Qualtrics out of Utah.
Right.
It was bought out for $8 billion by SAP, and everything done an IPO and a very solid business.
Wow.
This is the kind of the company that powers most of your ratings. So any service that you use and rate it from 1 to 5, that data or that form or analytics actually are made by a company called Qualtrics out of Utah. All the Utah in the US. It's it's not emerging as a startup hub, but it's not Silicon Valley, it's Utah. Right?
Yes.
So and this guy was giving this interview and he said, I meet new tech founders and I typically compare them with these kids who just rented a yacht and are going to go out in the sea for a fishing trip. And when they go out, they kind of have their hair nicely coiffed and gelled, and the music blaring in their little yacht. They think they're going to go out and catch some fish, and by midnight they'll be back, and they're going on a big picnic. And by the time they come back, it's a rough seas and no sea and no fish, and it's been very, very difficult. They didn't find any fish, but disheveled air all over the place, and real life lessons on what happens when you go to the rough sea all by yourself, wanting to catch fish. So he said, when I look at a startup and founders, all enthused about wanting to catch fish by midnight, this is the image that comes to my mind, and then I remind myself what they look like when they come back at night. So I guess that's the journey we all go through. So over time, we've, of course, all people who've done this before have internalized that journey. And I guess the most important skill there of keeping at it, pivoting, chiseling at the idea, refining it, pivoting, finally finding a product market fit, coming close to a near-death experience multiple times before something finally works out. That's just the way a startup works. Anything else is an anomaly, and you can't base your planning or your journey on that. So there you'll certainly find some kind of examples or outliers where someone came with an idea, woke up this morning, built it, Hotmail, what if you could check email online? Fantastic. Someone dreamed up that, built it in 4 days, sold it for $40 million. Sure, it happens once, once in 10 years. But a typical journey of starting a business is a 5 to 7 year journey, many pivots, many near-death experiences where you are struggling to meet payroll, and you go back and revise your idea many times before it finally works out.
Wow. But sir, within these 5 to 7 years, because you've done those 5 to 7 years multiple times, not just with your own startups, but also with other startups. So how do you balance your work and life, and also, mental health as a founder, as an investor, as a mentor? So how do you bring in that balance in life?
Sunny, I'm very hesitant to answer that question because I can give it to you kind of the straight up answer, but I have now kids and growing into your age. The elder is going to be 18 shortly, and I've become much more sensitive to giving this kind of prescriptive advice. But but for at least for people like me, we are just thick. We don't take no for an answer, and at it. So I can do many startups in parallel. That's what colleges do. I have no life, and I enjoy doing it. I wake up very early in the morning. I get very little sleep. All I do is think about ideas and execute them, build teams, and keep at it. And I regularly work 18-hour days, and I really enjoy doing it. And I just don't get it when someone tells me in their early 20s that this is something they can't do. They want a work-life balance. I don't get that, but because I never had it. But I wouldn't prescribe that to anyone because now I have kids growing into this age, and I've become more. I finally understand this. It's important to have a work-life balance. It's important to have mental well-being and ease into your true calling. Of course, you have to work hard. There's no substitute to working hard. You can't get far in life without going through lots of pain. Of course, without going through lots of failure. I tell my kids that I was reading my PhD thesis a few days ago. I found it in one of the lost folders in an old laptop, and I was laughing at it. As I read the introduction, I was like, what was I thinking? This is the really bad stuff. If one of my students did it, I'll throw them out of the window. But that's what, and I was at the time, I was super proud. I was 22 with my PhD thesis. I was on top of, but you look back and you laugh at yourself. But that's the process that one goes through. But for each one of those days and years and nights, I was working hard as I could, refusing to give up, working on multiple ideas, failing and failing and failing, and then eventually trying to find some modicum of success in all these things that I was doing. So I guess that's what it is.
Amazing. No, but mashallah, you've achieved a lot of success, sir. And also your learnings have now passed on to the rest of us, right? Where people are building startups under your mentorship, under your incubation centers as well. And now they can learn from you as a mentor directly. So I think it's amazing, that of course there needs to be a relentless period, where you need to keep going at it so that you can get what you want. And there's very few people who, you stay consistent with that as well, because I think it's really hard to stay consistent with the goals and, the mindset as well. So I'm really glad to hear that from your side. But also, sir, there's one picture on LinkedIn that you shared, I think a while ago, and it's a bucket list from 2016. And you mentioned a few things, which you've also check marked. So everything that you had on that list, more or so, I think you've sort of accomplished. So you had, let's say, a PhD in computers, you had go to MIT, startup with 10 million users, move to Pakistan, improve the government, start an incubation center for startups, and make a great university. And
this was
earlier than that?
This was 1997.
Oh my God.
This was 1997. When I was still an undergrad,
oh my God.
I wrote it down somewhere and found it in a drawer.
Right.
Many years later, and I remember I found it in a drawer, and had it, and then put it in my pocket alongside something else, and I was driving down to some place, and the driver was driving, and I was sitting next to him, and I pulled this up. And that's when I began to tick off things that had already happened. By the way, the list was longer,
right? Okay.
And I'd intentionally truncated the list to the things that had already been done. And I was while I was going through the list, I was smiling, but also kind of laughing at myself on how immature and how kind of to the point. Goals that I had at the time: do degree in computer, go to MIT, and those going to Stanford was not allowed, and so just very prescriptive.
But it's amazing.
Right?
It's amazing.
As a kid, pen these things down, but that's what it's been, and of course I think I'm very fortunate that I've been able to work on some of that. I still haven't done a 100 million startup. I think some of my agenda of doing a good university in Pakistan is. I've built a university, but still unfinished. And there's more to that list, and I don't know whether I'll get to live long enough to be able to do those things. But of course, I'm also slowing down with age. So there was a time I could go for much longer and work harder, but now age is also catching up with me. So I don't know whether the rest of that bucket list would come true.
Wow. But sir, if I can ask you about your goals, right? Like, how has that shift been for you since your 20s until now? And even further, inshallah, like how has that been for you?
Well, there's been a shift in thinking, of course. As you get older, you begin to value your family more. You cherish the time with your parents.
Yes.
Again, my kids are coming of an age where they will be applying to college soon, and we have begun to count months and weeks before they apply
amazing.
and leave the nest. So there is that. So you want to spend as much time with them as some of this, of course, wasn't as important for me when I was building my career early on, and all I could think of was doing one more research project and publishing one more research paper and working on one more startup idea and trying to accomplish this and that consumed my life. So that is beginning to change. I certainly see that. I think I've also become a kind of more grounded, where the optimism was, hey, I'm so smart, I'll wake up tomorrow with an idea and change the world. It doesn't work that way. It takes much longer to do these things. So there's more and more appreciation of that going forward. But I think some of the larger goals have kind of stayed the same, and the goal is to continue to build things that outlast you.
Right.
And I think that's kind of an interesting way to kind of think about this. If, many people have said this before in the startup world, if you can build and you can sell, you're unstoppable. So I think those are the two skills that one continues to invest in, to continue to build useful things and to continue to find inspiration of those things and skill to be able to sell them. Whether these are research ideas you're selling to your students and asking them to work on them, you're working on ideas and you want to convince the government to support you in pursuing those ideas, whether that's building products and selling them to customers. But I think sort of that the main skill as an entrepreneur is to build and to sell. And I think these are the two key skills. And as you become older, you learn management, you know which kind of people you can get along well with, how to build large teams, how to inspire them, or cajole them, or threaten them into doing greater things than they believe they're capable of doing. And while you said that other people benefit by working with me, etc., I know for sure now that I'm not an easy guy to work with. And that's typically when I'm interviewing or meeting someone and I like them and I think that to extend them a job offer, my first warning is that I'm not a good guy to work with. So you see us on social media, you hear about our third person reviews of us, you see my degrees and you see my very well-rehearsed talks, and you might think that's who I am, but that's not who I am. I'm relentless about what I'm trying to pursue. I don't get a lot of sleep. I'm unforgiving for myself. I'm unforgiving for others who work with me. And it really is sipping from a higher fire hose. That's I'm so self-critical. I pass this on to folks who work with me. We always punching above our weight. We're relentlessly innovating, relentlessly trying to pursue bigger goals than we believe we are capable of achieving. And I have this faith that people are capable. You give them the right environment and give them a plate to step up to, and most people have the capability to step up to whatever bar you set for them. So that's who I am. So it's not typically pleasant working with me. What I do promise to people who work with me is that we'll go very far. It will be quite an experience. We'll both be better off at the end of it. Whether we succeed, we make $100 million company, it's not in my entire control, but it's going to be, we're going to work as hard as we possibly can. And that's just,
No, I'm sure it's an amazing learning experience, sir, for anybody working with you. That your new resolution for the past 4 years has been the same, which is Apni Duniya Aap Paida Kar. For anybody who's going to be listening to this in English, I know Urdu mein zyada acha lagega, but if we were to translate in English, it pretty much means you create your own world. So I just really want to know, what does a day in your world look like?
It got me thinking also. Here is the reason I'm kind of so relentlessly focused on trying to create my own world, and it is also fashioned around that. Khudi means being self-reliant, and Apni Duniya Aap Paida Kar also means create your own world. Now, because I was part of the public sector for about 7 years, and of course, the sector offers you much more resources than as a private citizen you have access to. It also gives you more authority than an ordinary citizen has. So you could get a lot more done. And we were able to, get a lot done. But I was quite invested in building this university that I just started. I was very invested in trying to kind of take this whole incubation venture capital thing from the public sector forward. I wanted to create a fund of funds in the government, very similar to Israel's Yozma fund. We could do that, but we couldn't. And there was many other things that I wanted to do, but it ended very abruptly because of just the way politics plays out, especially in this neck of the woods. And that I begrudge. So I thought that was unfair, and I thought it wasn't unfair to just kind of let me go. That it was already on a huge opportunity cost. What was unfair? Many things that could have been continued and built upon and scaled were actually all destroyed in the process. The university didn't have a vice chancellor for a long time, and out of the 74 people that came back to Pakistan to work in that university, I think only about 3 or 4 are left. And it is really that whole institution has gone south. Now, education institutions really need to be protected from politics. The work that I did in public sector that I thought if it had gone on for another few years, this would have transformed a lot of things in Pakistan, but didn't happen. So therefore, when I decided that I'm going to now focus on trying to create the same resources and impact that I wished I could have in public sector, but without the crutches of a government job. So that's create your own world. So therefore, this is with that, I think grudge is the right word.
Yeah.
It is with that edge and that intensity that I'm right now. And as I told you that bucket list was truncated deliberately, I still have the part of it stored some. So I intend to go back to it at some stage. So I need to go back to public sector work at some stage, but only when personally enough resources and enough wealth that one could do it at a scale that they couldn't do it before and really take it on, because this country, I feel very strongly about, has so much potential, and we have let it, especially the 20-year-old. See, the average Pakistani is 22 years old. Compare that to an average American who's 38 years old. Compare that to a average Japanese who's 48 years old. So this is a country of a 22-year-old. And what have we done for them? You know, there is what has the state done for them? No one can go to a public sector school. No one can go to a hospital. 100 million unbanked population. There is very little law and order. There is electricity crisis here. I guess I was just joking with someone that probably the only facility from the state of Pakistan I'm currently using is the road infrastructure.
Right.
Everything else, you know,
that's true.
Solar.
That's true, yeah.
You know, we really are not depending on the government for the citizens. And this, and I feel very strongly that we've let this country down, and it was my generation and the generation before me and the generation before me who've let this country down. And at this point, I'm very busy trying to make it such that I'm resourceful enough that I can do something about it. So that's the rest of the bucket list.
So I just want to understand, like, how can we bridge the gap, as well as in terms of, you know, what the industry needs right now and what we're teaching our kids, and also how to revamp the education system in Pakistan, whether it's the public sector or the private one.
No, that's a great question. And for me, education has kind of three parts to this. So there is the school education. And as you know, about 50% of school-going children are out of school right now. So 25 million children in Pakistan are out of school. 45 million go to school, 25 million are out of school. So that's kind of the scale of the disaster at that scale. Two, the school education system is very poor, where the government schools are not very good. The private sector itself is not regulated. So therefore, you get what you get. Now, you look at India, and at least in the higher education system, they have buffered their education system from their school education system because they have their own college placement tests. In India, you see the IITs, and they have a test called the Joint Entrance Exam, which is very different from their matriculation FSC system, which is better than Pakistan, but still broken. And but they've kind of buffered their higher education system from their matriculation system. And we haven't done that also. So therefore, this spills over into higher education. Now you look at higher education, and that's also fairly bad. The public sector universities are just very poor quality. Private sector universities are very expensive and still poor quality. And around Pakistan, very few countries in the world where private sector is allowed to create for-profit universities. As you're fully aware, many countries don't allow that to happen. And education is either higher education is the state's business or not for profit. But in Pakistan, that's not true. So therefore, you get sort of, you know, all this, what we have right now, where you have graduates coming out. And at this point, at least you have LUMS and GIK and NUST and KA and this and that. And if you travel abroad now, you'll find, you know, Pakistanis in good grad schools or becoming professors in good universities. When I went to Cambridge in 1998 and then finished my PhD in 2001, I was the first Pakistani to do a PhD in computer science from Cambridge. Now, Pakistan has been around for 70 years. Cambridge has been around for 300 odd years. But that's I was the first Pakistani to do a PhD in computer science from Cambridge. What does that tell you? That and I wasn't the first one to be admitted in that program. In fact, there were two Pakistanis already pursuing that program, and neither of them finished the PhD degree.
Right.
And there were many before that. So just the what we are producing from Pakistani universities just didn't quite add up to where they needed to be. And it's you're saying engineers, the engineers are not very high quality. They certainly lack the soft skills. There's not enough focus on doing a holistic curriculum. So you went to Lambda GIK, at least they follow the American standard, which is, enough kind of a well-rounded education. But in most public universities, that's not even true. So that is a huge problem. And then the third one is skills. Now in India, where if they're not getting enough engineers, but the IT sector expects a lot of graduates to come in, they have their own training centers. So look at the Infosys Hyderabad training center. This trains something like 75,000 people every year. It's a residential 5-star campus. I've never seen anything like this before, in which they have in Hyderabad. And you've looked at the pictures of being there, but they have their own training facility as kind of the funnel program into their very large IT enterprise. Now we don't have any of that in Pakistan. So we lack in the school education, we lack in vocational skills and technical skills, and we also don't have a very well thought out higher education system. Now all of this needs to be fixed. Of course, it's not easy to fix it, and people who are interested in fixing it themselves are fairly mediocre. There is very little long-term vision in trying to kind of really do a kind of a radical rethink of what would it take to fix the education system in Pakistan. And if you don't fix the education system, then you will have what you have, which is the 5th largest population in the world, mostly young people, but not skilled enough, to kind of really contribute to the economy. And that's what you have right now. So that you correctly pointed that out, and that requires a radical rethink in what is the school, what can the state do, how can it co-opt the private sector, how can it regulate the private sector, what would the school curriculum look like? There are 2 school curriculum, 3 in Pakistan. There's a madrasa curriculum.
Yep, that's true.
Madrasas administers that. There is the local primary, secondary matriculation system, and there's the O and A levels. And there's also IB system, and then there's the high school system. There are actually 5 different curricula at the school education system. And then in the higher education system, there is the traditional 2-year BA. There is the public sector version of a kind of a semester system. And then there is the real kind of semester system with a well-rounded education in some of the elite private schools. But the private schools, the private universities fee, very few people can afford. So, and there are very few scholarships to be given out. So this requires a holistic rethink on what we want to do. Look at the Germany's or Malaysia's vocational training programs, and our government does that. There is no concept of that here. So most people end up doing a university degree, even if it's a 3rd-year program with not enough skills. And then there is no vocational training. There's no associate degree. So I think this just needs a radical rethink. The Higher Education Commission was reestablished with this view. I think somewhere along the way we've kind of lost our in higher education.
Sir, you recently had a talk on Future Fest as well, which is one of the biggest conferences that we have year on year in Pakistan, around the topic of knowledge economy versus innovation economy. And I think I would really want to get more into that idea as well, if you can share some learnings on that.
Sure. So I typically give people an example of a place like MIT. So when I first went there, I was quite underwhelmed. I went there from the University of Cambridge, which is a city-scale campus, very well laid out, nicely built. Each building had 100-year history or whatever. You go to MIT, at least at the time and when I went there, and the computer science lab was in a rented old building, and most of the other departments were in a rented old building. And MIT doesn't really have a proper campus. There is something called the Infinite Corridor, which is kind of a big long corridor with kind of some rooms on both sides. And there is no kind of gate that you enter to enter the university. There's no campus as such, right? And this is the world's best tech or engineering university. So it isn't because of the facilities that they offer, it's because of the people that they attract. And one good statistic is what impact MIT has had, the innovation of MIT has had on the world. And at the time, there was this report. This came out, I think, around 2001, 2002, by Bank Boston, called The Impact of Innovation. You can Google it also. And it said that MIT alumni have started 28,000 companies worldwide. They employ 3 million people and generate an annual revenue of $1.7 trillion. If MIT was a country, it will be the 11th richest country by GDP, by this scale.
Oh my God.
Now, it's not just MIT, add Stanford to it, which is on the West Coast. And combined MIT and Stanford alumni have created companies that generate an annual revenue of $4.7 trillion. Now, if MIT and Stanford were a country, it will be the 4th richest country in the world by GDP, ahead of Germany. That's the impact of 2 universities. And it's not just two universities, it's 2 computer science departments. This doesn't include life sciences or material sciences or avionics or aeronautics, none of that. This or drug discovery or life sciences. This is just computer science. And that's the impact that that these 2 universities have had on the global economy. And we don't have any of that, of course. So, but you look at IITs and they are beginning to now produce our Indian education system. And, you know, the CEO of Microsoft is an Indian, CEO of Google is an Indian.
Yes.
The CEO of Twitter was an Indian just a little while ago. And so on, you know, and people running bets on who will be the next Indian CEO of the IBM, this and that. And that's because of the great education system that they have. And these people are skilled and they can get that. And we're not there yet. So, you know, you'd be hard pushed to even find a vice president in a big university, a company who's from Pakistan. So finding a VP at Google, Pakistani VP at Google, I think they're 1 or 2 would be difficult. And finding a C-level kind of executive in a large enterprise from Pakistan would be difficult. So, so that's something we need to fix. So that's the innovation economy. And Pakistan needs to transition from a very feudal country, which is landed elite used to run the country, to an industrial country where that feudal elite had big industrial units and were running the country, to a country where young people are skilled and educated and they can be globally competitive and work on innovative new ideas and build innovative new enterprises. That is what's going to turn this country around.
Amazing. Sir, I think this is perfect segue to one of the things that you mentioned in another talk about how you divided Pakistan into different eras, on how a young person, you know, in different eras, let's say in the 1940s, 1960s, and then 2000s, can make a living or can get rich in a country like Pakistan. And I would really want you to share that because I think it's really inspirational. And
it's something that might offend a lot of people. So I do this with a degree of interpretation. But if you were a young graduate, you were a young student in a top tier university in Pakistan in the 1940s, this is the Indian Pakistan subcontinent. What is your hope of becoming wealthy and hence changing your lives of your family members, your social stature, and maybe the fortune of the country? And the bad news in 1940s was that there is no such hope. You had to have a large piece of agricultural land to become wealthy. And unless you were born in a family that already owned that land, there's nothing you can do to change that. There's no amount of education is going to enable you to buy a very large piece of agricultural land. So this was a time when the landed elite ruled the country, and the doors for economic, for you to climb the economic ladder were largely shut for the common man on the street. And that is what we saw in a country like Pakistan. Fast forward to 1960s, that's when Pakistan was getting an industrial revolution. And again, at the time, if you were a university student, with this optimism wanting to change your life, there's very little you could do because you can't go out and build a large industry, a sugar mill or a spinning mill, just because you are brilliant, because you need large amounts of money. And the money come from a bank, and the bank requires some collateral, and that collateral is typically real estate. And unless you are wealthy in 1940s, you're not going to be wealthy in 1960s in Pakistan also, right? Hence, it is well documented. Only 300 families in Pakistan increased their wealth, and those 300 families controlled all the industrial revolution. And that's what led to the nationalization of some industries, and then, you know, the whole slogan of Roti Kapra Makan for the young man, just so that they can get jobs in these large enterprises that rich people created. Now, fast forward to 2020, and you would see that the only way you can now become a billionaire, or you could change your life or the lives of people around you, is to do a tech company. And it's not just local. You know, look at the 1982 Forbes list. That's when the first time Forbes published this 100 richest people list in Pakistan, in the world, right? So the richest 100 people in the world, Forbes list, for the first time appeared in 1982.
Right.
And 60% of that list was inherited wealth. You had to be born in wealth to be wealthy. Another 30% was oil and real estate. and only about 5 to 10% people were founders who had started a company on their own and created value. Fast forward to 2020, and you would see that now most of that list is founders. None of that is inherited wealth. Only about 5-10% is oil and gas. Actually, the 8 of the 10 richest people are founders that you and I know. And these are people who Steve Jobs, he was an adopted child, dropped out of university. He didn't have any connections or large swat or industrial conglomerate backing him. He had a good idea and started with that, and that's what created that kind of wealth. And he trailblazed, and these people demonstrated. And this is just the second generation in US, right? So, of people learning on how to build large enterprises because of brilliant ideas. And I think it is certainly going to spill over into parts of the world that we are in. And my hope, Sania, is for people like you to have the skill and education to work on innovative new ideas and to raise venture capital, which you don't have to return. You don't have to pay any interest on that. It's someone betting on your success, putting wealth in your idea, investing in your ideas. That's the new world. You don't have to go to a bank and collateralize a large land. You collateralize your idea, and that's what has created this wealth. So for me, in the capitalist world, the best instrument that they have in the capitalist world is the venture capital, because it democratizes wealth. This is one instrument that has consistently transferred wealth from the wealthy people to brilliant people. Wow. And I think I love that. And I think that's hopefully going to happen a lot in Pakistan also. Sania, it's been a pleasure connecting with you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Not an interview, but a call, but more power to you. Let's stay in touch.
For sure.
And I hope to see more of you when you're in Pakistan.